Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the History of Fan Anime. I'm your host, William Chow, and in today's episode, I'm going to pull out a really old piece of nostalgia. I want to pull out the old Books Nippan catalog, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Books Nippon and the demise of Books Nippon, and how people started calling it Crooks Nippon. And we're going to get into a little bit of history and go through the actual catalog for that. So before I begin, I'd like to remind everyone to go down below, click like, and click subscribe. Any sort of comments and maybe maybe your personal experience with bookstores and different places where you got anime the first thing. Some maybe the first anime book that you bought. Sure, put it down in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. Again, if you want to support me financially, you can go down to my links below. We have the PayPal and the Patreon available for that, as well as the give me a thanks about links also activated below. Any support really does help. Also, that I want to make a little sort of neat little note. I'm recently been doing lots of work with the AI and that kind of stuff. I've now generated a sort of an anime song designed for this channel and that kind of stuff. Again, link below as well, so you can have a look at that. Just have a good little laugh at that, just to see what the new comic stuff going on there. The other new little thing that's been going on for all you sort of anime fans as well as video game fans. The game that I'm playing right now is Langreaser Mobile, and one of the most recent crossovers which is happening right now is they've got a crossover going over with Dead or Alive 6. So you can actually use a bunch of the Dead or Alive 6 characters in the game Langreaser. And one of the guaranteed characters that you can do with enough by doing the quests and that kind of stuff during the limited engagement is the main character Katsumi. And you can actually they're not a sponsor, but again, I'm playing that a lot. For those people I know who are really interested in video games, that kind of stuff, and these crossovers are kind of rare. Do check that out. The game is free to play, so again, you want to go in there and look at it. So again, today's episode we're going to get into this new thing called I've managed to find in my catalog, which is the Books Nippon catalog. So again, in the early times of like 1988, when I was first getting into anime, one of the first things that a lot of people had problems with is where the hell do you get Japanese animation from? Okay, because it's not mainstream or anything like that. There was no translations going on. So where do people get all this anime? Like, where do they know about it from? Okay, and so these sources for anime and that kind of stuff became very rare and very few of them. Obviously, I've made episodes, commenting that one of the biggest finds for me, and especially here in Vancouver, is that we actually had a local mom and pop type of shop called Sophia's Bookstore, and that was one of the first bookstores that I got into in 1987. And where I started buying Japanese magazines, getting into things like Animedia, New Type, Anime, and then progressing on from there. But obviously, some people, in other parts of the U.S. and that kind of stuff, didn't have those type of things. Maybe they had a Kinikonua bookstore, like for example in Seattle's International District or something. Maybe they had the Nikkaku Animart in San Jose, for example. Those type of mom and pop shops, sort of occurred. But one of the biggest sort of new things that had happened was this thing called the Books Nippon. Now, Books Nippon was one of these side projects from U.S. Renditions, and of course, U.S. Renditions was one of the first anime companies that sort of released the initial releases of Dangayo and Ixer 1, okay, and so one of the projects that they did was they tried to get into the market of trying to sell anime books, okay. So I pulled out this catalog and I'll open it up here, and you can see that there's a large number of things that are really interesting to anime fans at the time. a lot of the more popular animes at this bigger time, but things like Golf Force, Bubblegum Crisis, Gunbusters, and that kind of stuff. And so they had available some of the books from everything. So I'm flipping to this, Books Upon New Generation catalog here, and as I said, I have virtually every single book that's in this catalog here, so I know. So let's just go over a few examples of some of the ones that are in this book, and just show you some different things. I also actually have some letters while doing research for someone, in regards to the history of some of the animes and that kind of stuff. I went through some of my old correspondence, and so now I've got some dates and that stuff to help lock down some of the stories. So I'll go over that in the next little bit. So let's go and look at some of these examples from the catalog. Okay, so here we have the kind of a fold out sort of catalog, right? And it's from Books Upon. Now, initially, there's that you notice that they got written the price of $2. Like, who in the hell, thinks it's a good idea to put a price tag on your catalog? Like, duh, like. I mean, obviously, I got this catalog when I went to buy the Books Upon booth when I went to Comic-Con in 1989, right? And they were just handing it out, right? And again, this is when US Renditions was just trying to get ready to, to launch, their VHS tapes of Dangayo and Extra One and that kind of stuff. But so they're trying to get this sort of books thing going, right? And kind of for a lot of people, this was a really new thing, right? Because anime was so hard to get, there's very, very limited coverage inside a lot of these Japanese magazines, that kind of stuff and whatnot. So that's even getting the Japanese magazine was really, really tough, right? So a lot of people just didn't know where to get it. So these guys are being very high profile, and getting the word out that they actually have all this cool stuff, right? And these cool anime magazines from a lot of these so-called shows that people that are sort of following. And you can just see on the catalog here, they got major popular stuff that was really big at this particular time. And as you can see, things like there's Outlanders, there's Golf Force, Black Magic M66, Totoro, Bubblegum Crisis, Appleseed, Gunbusters, or Aim for the Ace, right? And so they're trying to get those people to say, okay, hey, this is what the new popular anime is. We got the books for it, right? So that's what their big sort of pull, and that's what this is the welcome to the new generation, as in Robotech new generation or whatever. It's kind of bizarre. Anyway, now going through this list, I said I've got like 90% of all the books in this sort of list here, like all the Bum Crisis, the books there, the Golf Force 2, the Black Magic M66, the Golf Force Illustrations, Dream Hunter Realm, the Order Battle Done by, both the Zeta Gundam and the Charge Counterattack, the Dragon's Heaven, the Art of Dragons, the Akira book, Extra One, the Mikimoto's Movement, the Dirty Pale Illustrations. That was a good one. Gundam Wars, both and Gundam Wars Project. Those are both the Hellboy Japan thing. 5-Star Stories, Dominion Tank Police. The Hobby Japan. Gundam New Generation. One of the best ones, the Artemic design book from the Beat Club special. That was really, really good. The Dirty Pair Cinema book was really good too. Yeah. So I had like virtually everything on this sort of list here, and so and the thing about that is that they were good because they were trying to get to everybody and anybody. And if you look at this sort of the shipping instructions there, they say that they can ship to Canada, they can ship to Australia, and that kind of stuff. So they're really trying to get anime everywhere, right? Now it was really kind of dumb in some respects, the way that they're trying to take orders and that kind of stuff, and and the sort of the long time it took for them to process the orders, because you would think nowadays, they should be able to do lots of that kind of stuff. And the fact that the out of stock policy was kind of wacko too, because you hear that because they're using UPS to do all the deliveries, right? It says you will receive your order in 4 to 6 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks using UPS. I mean, that's like ridiculous, right? Also, you can kind of go with this. You can also read, if you do not receive your order within after 6 weeks, please send a letter detailing your order. So, like, after 6 weeks, i.e., we forgot about you. You have to send them a letter to say, hey, what the hell happened to my order? And then, what will happen is that, they will edit, they'll ship you the order, okay? Well, they'll issue you a credit memo if the titles are unavailable. So, so let's say you want, okay, I want like, the Bubble Crisis 1, 2, and 3, but like one of the Bubble Crisis is out of stock. Well, they're not going to give you back your money. They're just going to give you a credit memo, so you have to buy something else. So isn't that like kind of stupid? They're taking your money. Sorry, like, oh, sorry, one of the books is out of stock, so we're not going to give you a refund. We'll just give you like a credit note or whatever, so you can go and spend it on something else. And it's like out of stock items. Due to the great demand of some items, we may be temporarily or permanently out of stock. Yeah, i.e., if you keep asking for Bubble Crisis books, the Japanese, sellers are not going to reprint anymore. They're just going to say, well, screw it. That's it. We got no more. Too bad, right? In this case, we will do our best to fill a partial order and then issue you a credit memo. If all titles are unavailable, then we will return your payment. So, doesn't it sound kind of stupid that, okay, so you order Bubble Crisis 1 and 2, and then they realize that, let's say, number 2 is out of stock, and then you go, okay, we'll send you number 1, and, the money that you sent for Bubble Crisis number 2, yeah, we're not going to give you that back, but you have to, we're going to give you a credit memo, so that you have to spend that money on some other stupid book that you may or may not be interested in. It's like, duh, no wonder why these guys owe money. And it takes you 4 to 6 weeks for them to send you the order anyway, even using UPS, okay, right? A courier. And the fact that, oh, yeah, if we forget about your order in 6 weeks, right, you have to tell them, hey, what the hell happened to my Bubble Crisis book 2 book? And then they'll say, oh, yeah, terribly sorry. Yeah, we forgot. So we'll give you this credit note for, whatever, and then you can buy something else that we have that, maybe really crappy and like, it's not Bubble Crisis or whatever that, you may or not like, may or may not like. I mean, like, this is like the most dumbest policies ever, right? So the neat thing about, going through this catalog is that, it shows that basically a lot of the stuff that they have in these catalogs and that kind of stuff are really, really, at the time was kind of new, right? But one of the major issues that they had right away, and you can sort of see by some of the pricing, and I'll show you when I get into them, right? is that there's stuff that obviously as they printed this catalog and then they did the reprints, stuff went out of stock. For example, there's a couple on this one here, "Fools for the City," which is the sub line for the 5-star stories type of idea, right? A whole bunch of the other 5-star story books are out of stock already. 5 stars 1 and 2 are all out of stock, and the Appleseed is out of stock. And the problem with a lot of the stuff is that the catalogs never kept up with the actual stock that they have, right? I mean, even things like a place like Nikaku Animart, they just had like kind of quick little lists, and they just kind of photocopied it, and they just made little, and they sent them out by mail and all this kind of stuff to people, and had little just short snippets, right? No pictures, no nothing, kind of thing, right? And it was easy to update. These ones are way harder. All this kind of this nice print and that kind of stuff that they have on this is hard to do and very costly to do, right? So so to keep maintaining stuff that an inventory of all the stuff and trying to guess
what would be really popular to sell, and what titles to hold lots of is really really difficult. For example, let's say Digital Target Gray, for example, right? I'm sure that at this particular time, Eclipse was trying to release more episodes, like more comics of this, right? So, they're trying to work out the fact that, hey, I know that those guys are kind of translating it in English, but they're doing it very slowly. You're really interested in the story, you can get this copy of Gray here with no translation, of course, and whatnot. But you can order from us or whatever, right? Type of idea, right? And so they got all these other various different titles and that kind of stuff, and they're trying to make it so that for the new people, this is your first time exposure, and they're trying to be your connection in order to get all this kind of anime books and that kind of stuff. Now, this may lead to several different problems on there. Obviously, they've got quite a few people that have some money, and they're trying to license anime and that kind of stuff, as well as trying to run this sort of bookstore kind of thing going on there at the same time. And good for them for trying, and I'm sure a lot of people did get into anime with them, but I don't know if they've really had a really solid business model and really thought about how to make this grow and that kind of stuff. Because I said they probably didn't have the same experience as let's say a Barnes and Noble, or even like a Kinyu-Kinua, or nor have the connections like a Kinyu-Kinua or a Wasei bookstore, or for that matter, even any connections to like the same connections that like a mom and pop shop would kind of have, like Sophia's bookstore and that kind of stuff, or Nikkaku Animart kind of idea. So I don't know if that was a really good idea, and that's probably why the whole thing kind of went to hell. But anyway, let's go to look at some examples, and I'll just kind of talk more about that there. Okay, we'll start with this book here, the Golf Wars 2 complete file. This is a really beautiful book because it really has a lot of nice pictures and that kind of stuff of the actual looks, really detailed designs of the mechs and that kind of stuff, character design and that information, different locales, the ships and that kind of stuff, especially the attack ship there, and different sort of drawings and that kind of stuff of the various different outlines, preconceptual world, and the ship designs and that kind of stuff in there. Very very nice illustration book for that. And then it has all the various different explanations, the synopsis sheets, the press sheets, the supplement kind of information, that kind of stuff, and that kind of stuff. Anyway, but the key point about it is the fact that is if you look at the very bottom here, the yen price on this one was 1,000 yen. So using the conversion, even at this particular time, the U.S. dollar was really strong, and when it was very very comparable to the Japanese yen, even at the time when the Japanese yen was really strong. But even at this time, 1,000 yen, when I had to go and pay for this, would have been about $10 US, roughly, right? One yen is equal to about 1 penny, roughly, right? So when I had to go pay for this thing, right, it would have be about the conversion rate was like 1.6 to roughly about 2.0. So this would cost me about $20 Canadian. Now, even at this particular time, the Canadian dollar was a lot lower than the US dollar, and it would have been probably like 75 cents, right? So it would have been about $15 US to buy this book from a similar U.S. distributor, right? So maybe like for example, like Kinyu-Kinua or whatever, it should have cost about $15 roughly. Okay, 15 to 20. That would have been sort of the range, right? So and that would that for a lot of people would have been probably fine, right? But the problem is that if you look on this Books Nippon catalog, they were charging $20. Okay, so they were charging about a 2.0 exchange rate in from Japanese to the U.S., which was rather expensive. Because even for me, trying to get it in Canadian funds, right? Where the Canadian funds, is lower than the U.S. one, right? You know, that would mean that they're taking a pretty huge cut, and a pretty big exchange rate. Don't forget, you still have to pay for the postage by UPS or whatever for them to get it to you, right? So this is why, why it wasn't very economical, to get lots of stuff from Books Nippan, because the pricing was really high, especially if you quickly knew about Nikkaku Animart, or if you had or were close to a Kinnikinua, which a lot of places in the western West Coast, right? Seattle, and Los Angeles, San Diego, that's the idea. You can get sort of that kind of information very quickly. Okay, and so when you find out that if you're paying 1,000 yen, like, why the hell are you buying it from these guys? Okay, so I'll just kind of leave it at that, and then just go to the next example before I do price comparisons for that. But yeah, nice book also as well. Okay, the second example is this book here. This is the Gunbuster. It's a Toppen Rai film book number 1. Okay, now again, this is the version of a this is a color comic type of idea, right? So let's move the OB out of the way here for you, and it's a nice sort of perfect kind of book for that, because it basically goes through the story in colorful detail, giving you the information and that kind of stuff about the mechs and the characters, the mechanics, different clips and that kind of stuff, and it goes through the actual film story and different parts of the story and whatnot, with comments and running things about the actual particular book and that kind of stuff in the film story. Okay, so again, very great book, great art collection, that kind of stuff. Lots of information about the actual things, how to draw the characters and that kind of stuff and whatnot. Again, but the important part is that if you go to the back page here, okay, I'll move the OB out of the way here. The yen price is 980 yen, so virtually $10. So about the same as the Golf Wars book as well. Okay, it should be about $9.80 US, right, or whatever. If you just go by exchange rate, but of course, if I had to buy this from Iwase bookstore, like Sophia's bookstore at that time, it probably would have cost me about 20 Canadian dollars roughly. And if I was going to do it from a U.S. place like Nikkaku Animart and that kind of stuff, this probably would have cost, again, probably $15, $16, $17, or whatever. That's probably what this is, okay? But if you go and look at the Books Nippan catalog, again, they're charging $22 for this thing. So so again, they're making it, which is really high for this kind of a thing. So again, if you're pricing your stuff above the competition, right? Then unless other people don't know about any of the other options, and you're like the only option that is out there, you're making a really big gamble that people are going to buy stuff and continue buying stuff from you, especially when they learn, hey, these other guys are charging less, or maybe the comic book store close by, or whatever is getting it for less, or charging less, or putting it on sale or whatever, then that's why you're going to have real problems selling this stuff, right? And especially if you can't keep up with the what's new and whatnot, from them, right? Coming in from Japan, keeping up with all the new releases and that kind of stuff. So that's where places like an actual bookstore like Kinnikinua, Sophia's bookstore, and that kind of stuff, they had a huge advantage over these guys, because A, they had better pricing, and B, they had better selection, right? They had a really better, and they were actually like real stores, right? They didn't have these weird holding money policies and weird customer service and all this weird stuff. Okay, so that's part of the reason why the service and that kind of stuff is really bad. Anyway, Let's go to some of the sort of history and stories that I found in my articles. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to some letters here. So again, this is a letter from I'm gonna call her name Cindy from the CFO Denver. Again, if you want to go back to my previous episodes where I talk about letters from the CFO and that kind of stuff, do check the database of episodes where we talk about old letters and fan mail. Do check those out to look at those. Anyway, so actually, this is my fifth letter from going back and forth between Cindy, and it is dated April 8th, 1988. Okay, so again, we're handwriting letters to each other. She's got beautiful penmanship, okay, on this, right? So she's not even like using computer or typewriter or anything like that, right? She's like the university computers or anything like that. No. She's like handwriting this stuff, okay. Beautiful penmanship, anyway. So again, you'll see by the previous letters that she wrote. Very, very nice. Anyway, so putting a reference on the date on this is 4/8/88, so 1988. Again, right in the height of Books in the Pond. Okay, doing that kind of stuff. And so I want to flip ahead to the letter here. Okay, so and in the letter, okay, so it's on page 2. She writes, "Speaking of money, I agree that Books in the Pond is getting a little out of hand." So in 1988, people are already realizing Books in the Pond is a ripoff. Okay, here he goes. "I just recently got a subscription to New Type and Animedia through them. Okay, the magazines they charge are about the same as price as the local comic store. So I didn't mind it too much. But since the Books in the Pond's prices went up, the local comic store has stopped getting the Japanese stuff. Since that's probably where they got it from. So they realized that the comic book store, getting through either previews or through Books Upon doing distribution through previews, whatever, right? They're getting it, and then they don't get it anymore, or because it's just the prices went they're pretty crazy in the books themselves, right? You realize that hey, if they're jacking up the prices that much, holy crap! I mean it's really expensive. And again, she's a college student at this time, and doesn't have an extra part-time side gig. And even if she did, right, you're spending a hell of a lot of money on this on the anime stuff when you don't have a lot of disposable income. It's really, really tough. Anyway. I introduced her to Sophia's bookstore. Basically, I went down to my local bookstore, grabbed up a card, and I asked them, "Hey, do you do mail order and all that kind of stuff?" And they said, "Yeah, can you do subscriptions and send them out?" And he goes, "Yep, we can do all that stuff." So I took a business card, and then the next batch of tapes and letters I sent her the business card for Sophia's bookstore. And there we go. So that's exactly what this is. Does Sophia bookstores do mail order? And yes, they do. My comment is simply like, for example, New Type magazine, Animedia magazine. Okay, they're about 400 to 500 yen. Okay, so they should, exchange rate wise, they should be about $5 roughly. Okay. I don't ever sort of remember paying more than like $10 Canadian for them. So if I'm paying $10 Canadian for them, you guys in the US should be paying about $7.50, okay, roughly. But, at 250% markup, you're paying closer to $15 for that, right? Or, even, some retarded price like that, right? It's just ridiculous when they start getting to like, Books and Pawn start getting up to like 3 times the yen price, then people just threw up their hands and said, forget it. This is like way too pricey. A 300% markup is just too much. Anyway, this is sort of what happened, right? People started learning, hey, there's other places, Sophia's bookstore, Nikaku Anamart, Kinyu Kinua, Iwazi bookstore, all these places, they'll do mail order, no problem. And they'll charge only what you buy. They won't overcharge you if they get a back order. They're not going to charge you for the back order, right? They just say, hey, it just never came in, so we don't charge the customer. That's fine, right? But, it's just ridiculous what they did. that this is my letter sending back, and again, I don't mind the address because I don't live there anymore. So go away. That's not important. Anyway, as you notice, the date on it is April 17th, 1988. So again, she just wrote her letter on the 8th. Obviously, she put a postage stamp on it and sent it to me, and then just going by regular snail mail. It got to me probably a couple days. They said here in a couple days again, it's on the 13th, right? So it took 5 days to get to me, and here again, about 4 days later, I'm writing the letter back to her. This was done on an Apple II computer. And it's been printed out on a dot matrix printer, a Roland 1011 dot matrix printer. This is what this is printed out on. Okay, so again, in my reply on the 17th, I wrote back and said this. Okay, so I flip ahead here, and it says, just 2 days ago, so basically on the 15th of April, 1988, I went to Sophia's bookstore to buy $190 Canadian, so roughly at that time $140 US in books. They included the classic books, The Art of Arion, very nice book. The Art of Nausicaa, also super detailed Studio Ghibli book, beautiful. I bought 2 Dragonar books, the 100% new type for Dragonar and the Animedia Special for Dragonar. I bought the Golf Force 2 MOOC, okay, and the April's edition of Animedia magazine. So again, I think, this is 1988, okay. People in Japan are already, selling and picking up their copy of the April 1988 Animedia magazine. Sure, it took a little bit of time, but basically on the 17th, I had this month's issue of Animedia magazine purchased. So I'm buying a current Japanese magazine in the current month that it actually is valid. So basically, things like the TV listings and all that kind of stuff are actively valid and it can be used, right? So this gives you an indication of the lag time. There is literally very, very little, if none at all, in terms of lag time. So this gives you an indication of how good the service that Sophia's bookstore said. And it says not much, and then I go talk about the different things. But this is a really good indication of actual exchange value, right? This is sort of what the mom and pop shops were able to do. Okay, so let's run through the shopping list here. We have the Art of Arion, okay, and the yen price of that one is 2,500 yen, okay. And then we have the Art of Nausicaa, that is 2,524. So it had, it was at a time where they had to add the extra little bit of tax. So normally it would be 2,500, but they had to add the tax on that. The next one was the Dragonar Animedia Special, that is 580 yen. I bought 2 Dragonar books, right? So I also bought the 100% new type version. The 100% new type version of that is 980 yen. All right, and I also bought the Golf Force 2 MOOC, which is the one I showed earlier, and that is priced at 1,000 yen. And I said I picked up April's issue of Animedia magazine, so that's 490 yen for the magazine. Okay. So I did the price breakdown here. So we have all the items added together is 7,174 yen. At the time, the PST is only 7%. There is no GST because GST wasn't introduced until 1991. So therefore, $190 Canadian, like I said, minus the PST would have been around 176.70. The Canadian to Japanese exchange rate at that time was 104.98. So again, the Canadian dollar was really pretty strong against the Japanese yen at that time, right? So it's almost trading equally. So therefore, that raw yen total should have been around $68.80 Canadian. So obviously, as I said, Sophia Bookstore does a markup where they have to, they obviously have to pay for the shipping. They have to also do the the exchange rate and of course customs, and then of course they got to make a markup selling it in their store. So their total markup for me would have been 257%. So it was in line to what the advertised price of what Books Nippan was charging when they first made the camp, which just makes sense because that's about the same time they made these things. The problem was, of course, the prices went up, right? So you can see by the chart here, the Japanese to U.S. to Japanese exchange rate would have been 128.5. So basically $1 US, so 100 pennies, would have bought 128.50 yen. Okay. So therefore, the U.S. price on the raw total of 71.78 should have been around $55.83. And I said in the letter that because of what I paid at that time, that my total would have been around 140 US. Okay, and that's of course. So what had happened is that shouldn't have been happening, right? So you would think, like, if you look at this graph here, the U.S. dollar kept getting stronger and stronger, and was able to buy more and more yen. So by the time you got to 1990, throughout so all throughout the next year and then through the year that continued. Okay, so when they made this catalog back in 1988, of course, they kept the U.S. dollar kept getting better and better. So therefore, up to up to 160, right? So you gained almost 40 points. So that's 20% more buying power, okay, that the U.S. dollar had. So the price should have been going down 20%. Instead, Books Nippan increased their index to almost 300%. So they went up 50% when the U.S. dollar went down 20%, right? Or yen went down 20%. So that didn't make any sense. So Books Nippan prices kept going up and up and up, and obviously people like Cindy here realized, holy crap, why is it going up? This is getting so freaking expensive. When other people like Sophia's bookstore and Iwase bookstore, Kinyu, the ones that had a floating exchange rate, okay, based on the yen price, okay, their prices were going down. Okay, so all of a sudden, starting from this benchmark of, let's say, 250% or whatever, it started dropping until it got to like 200%, right? And so why are you gonna go to Books Nippan and pay 300% for the same book you could go to, for example, Sophia's bookstore and get for 200% markup, right? Didn't make any sense. So that's when for example, when I sent the business card of Sophia bookstore to Cindy, she realized, okay, hey, maybe I should get my subscription from these guys instead of from Books Nippan. And I think later on she then switched over to like Kinyu or something out of Seattle, because obviously the shipping within the U.S. is cheaper. So you can see why that with the continuing problems of Books Nippan and how they're holding people's money, a huge issue of not doing refunds and all this other stuff, they quickly got changed over to Crooks Nippan, just because the fact that they are charging, they're overcharging for their books. They are, really, really slow, 4 to 6 weeks for a lot of deliveries and stuff. Even though it's supposed to be UPS, I mean, what the hell, right? And just not enough people handling customer service, so a lot of people's orders get lost or whatever, and nothing will be done unless you literally complain to them saying that, hey, I paid for this book 6 weeks ago and I still haven't got it. So why the people are doing all this headache kind of stuff when all these even smaller mom and pop shops like Sophia's bookstore do a way better job keeping track of customers' orders, only charging the customer when the order can be filled and things like this. Again, these companies were willing to send stuff anywhere, in Canada, US, and all that stuff, no problem. So, why in the heck are we going to this place called Books Nippan? Why, right? Like, why bother? And then that's exactly what happens, as people learn about more things and stores to go to, the FAQs on the internet. Start telling people, hey, these are some other options. these companies started advertising in these other magazines, especially like the Kaku Animart and that kind of stuff. They started advertising, and again, they said, well, hey, the prices are way better. Why am I going to go to these guys for all these things? Books, pencil cases, manga, whatever. I'm like, forget it. I'm not going to them. So eventually, yeah, in the early '90s, U.S. renditions, closed their division down, and of course, all with that went Books Nippon, and in some ways, there's some good memories for the people who bought some of the early stuff early, but again, they got taken advantage of with the hey, you're a noob price, we'll charge you extra, and a lot of people who are really desperate for anime at that time got taken advantage of at that time, and that's what happens with the supply and demand issue.
Okay, so I hope you found that really interesting. This is a little bit of history for some of the people who are find that the company, like something like Books Nippon or Nikaku Animart or even your local Kinyakunua, are probably these places that you can remember as one of the first places that you bought a Japanese art book or maybe a Japanese magazine. Again, a lot of people did get them from their local comic book stores. That's also another very common thing. So again, if you have a story of your first book that you remember, or your sort of purchase that you did from the Books Nippon, or like a Kinshinua or something like that, yeah, well, write it in the comment below. I'd love to hear some of the things that you bought. So anyway, this is one of the episodes that we have this kind of old memorabilia and that kind of stuff that we're brought up to share. And again, don't forget to hit click like and click subscribe, and we will get into more stories of the past and some more memorabilia. All right. So until next time, I will see you again.